The loan officer slid the folder across the conference table and tapped the last page with her pen. "That's your signature," she said. My vision tunneled. The paper trembled under my fingers. My name, Madeline Porter, written in my handwriting, curved and confident, stamped beneath a mortgage for a house I had never seen, never toured, never wanted. Across from me, Mallory stared at her lap. The room smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the signature that looked exactly like mine but wasn't. The loops were perfect. The slant was identical. Someone had studied my handwriting carefully enough to replicate it flawlessly. That someone was sitting 3 feet away from me, picking at her nail polish like this was just another boring Tuesday afternoon. My twin sister had stolen my identity. When the loan officer said, "I'm required to report this," my mother's chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Wait," she said too quickly. "This is a family misunderstanding." Her voice had that edge it always got when she was protecting Mallory. That desperate tone that made excuses before anyone asked for them. The loan officer's expression didn't change. She picked up her phone with steady hands. That's when the door opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, calm and polite, like this was just another Tuesday. One was older with graying hair. The other looked fresh out of the academy. My sister flinched. Actually flinched, like she hadn't expected consequences to arrive so quickly. My hands went numb. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. But the mortgage papers were real. The forged signature was real. The police were real. I turned to Mallory. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her gaze stayed fixed on some invisible spot on the floor. Her shoulders hunched forward. I searched her face for something. Shame, regret, fear, anything that looked like remorse. Instead, I saw calculation. Her mind was working, figuring angles, planning her next move. That look hurt worse than the sirens I could hear approaching outside. Worse than seeing my name on documents I'd never signed. Worse than realizing my own twin had practiced my signature until she could forge it perfectly. This wasn't a desperate mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was cold, calculated betrayal. The person who'd shared a womb with me, who'd learned to walk holding my hand, who'd promised we'd always protect each other. She'd planned this. Every detail, every lie, every stolen piece of my identity. The words felt unreal even as they settled into my bones. This was my life now. This was the sentence I'd have to explain to friends, to coworkers, to anyone who ran a credit check on me. My twin sister committed fraud using my identity. My twin sister bought a house by stealing my name. My twin sister destroyed my financial future because she couldn't be bothered to fix her own mistakes. The older police officer was speaking, but his words sounded muffled, like I was underwater. Something about identity theft, federal crime, serious charges. My mother kept interrupting, her voice rising with each attempt. The loan officer sat back in her chair, arms crossed, waiting for the chaos to settle. She'd seen this before, I realized. This wasn't her first fraud case. I wondered how many of them involved family. My name is Madeline. I'm the older twin by 6 minutes. 6 minutes that somehow made all the difference in our parents' eyes. I became the responsible one. The organized one. The one who moved back into our childhood home to help after my dad's stroke 2 years ago. The one who paid bills on time and trusted family without question. I worked as a dental hygienist at Riverside Family Dental, saving money carefully, building credit slowly, planning for a future that included my own house someday. A real house that I'd chosen and earned and signed for with my own hand. I never thought the person who would destroy my financial identity would share my face. Would know every security question answer. Would have access to my birth certificate and social security number because we grew up in the same house, with the same parents, sharing the same everything. Mallory was always protected. When she failed algebra sophomore year, the teacher was too harsh. When she got fired from 3 jobs in 2 years, the bosses were toxic and didn't appreciate her creativity. When she wanted something she couldn't afford, which was constantly, someone else found a way. Usually me. I'd lent her money for car repairs that never happened. Paid for groceries when she claimed her ex-husband was late with child support. Covered her share of Mom's birthday dinner because she'd forgotten her wallet. Every time she promised to pay me back. Every time she never did. And every time I let it go because that's what sisters did. That's what family did. We helped each other. Except Mallory's version of help only went one direction. She took and took and took, and I kept giving because I believed that's what love looked like. I was wrong. She called it her miracle. A white two-story with black shutters in the nice part of town. Open concept kitchen with granite countertops. Backyard big enough for her kids to play. Big enough for the life she posted about on social media but never worked for. I'd seen the photos on her Instagram. The carefully staged shots of her morning coffee on the new deck. Her kids playing on the swing set she'd somehow afforded. The hashtags about blessed and manifesting and new beginnings. I remember thinking the timing didn't make sense. She'd declared bankruptcy just 18 months ago. No bank would approve her for a mortgage that quickly. I remember the confusion I felt, the questions that formed in my mind. I remember ignoring that thought, pushing it away. Telling myself Mallory had finally gotten her act together. That she'd found a co-signer or a special program. That she'd actually earned something for once. The loan officer turned another page, her pen making soft scratching sounds against the paper. She matched your handwriting unusually well, she said. Her tone was professional but I heard the implications underneath. This looks practiced. Practiced. My stomach dropped as I imagined my sister tracing my signature late at night, perfecting the slant, the pressure, the way I looped the M and crossed the T. I thought about her sitting at her kitchen table. The kitchen table in the house she'd bought with my stolen identity, practicing over and over until she could become me on paper. How many practice sheets had she thrown away? How many times had she compared her forgery to my real signature, adjusting the angle of her pen, the speed of her hand? She'd studied me like a subject, memorized me like a part in a play. Becoming me must have taken weeks of dedication, of planning, of deliberate, calculated theft. That's when it clicked. The missing envelopes, the redirected mail, the bank letters that must have gotten lost. I'd called the bank 3 times about missing statements. They'd insisted everything was being mailed to my correct address. I'd assumed it was a postal service problem. Maybe mail theft. I'd even filed a complaint with the post office. They didn't get lost. They were stolen. Mallory had filed a change of address form, routing all my financial correspondence to a P.O. box I knew nothing about. She'd been intercepting my mail for months, maybe longer. Long enough to open a mortgage in my name. Long enough to max out credit cards I'd never applied for. Long enough to bury me in debt while I remained completely unaware. Every letter about my new accounts had gone straight to her. Every notice about the mortgage approval. Every document that should have alerted me to the fraud happening in real time. Mallory finally spoke. "I thought you'd be happy for me," she said softly. Her voice had that wounded quality she always used when caught. Like she was the victim. Like I was being unreasonable for objecting to identity theft. Happy. I laughed once. It came out sharp and broken, echoing too loud in the tense silence of the conference room. "Happy," I repeated. "You stole my identity. You forged my signature. You bought a house in my name and you thought I'd be happy." She flinched at my tone. But she should flinch. She should feel a fraction of the betrayal currently ripping through my chest. "I was going to tell you eventually," she said. "I just needed to get settled first. I was going to make the payments. You would never have known. But I did know. And now everyone knew. The loan officer knew. Police knew. Soon the prosecutor would know. This wasn't going away." My father rubbed his temples, the gesture he always made when stressed. "She didn't mean to hurt you," he said. His voice carried that familiar pleading tone. "We just didn't want her dreams crushed. She deserves a fresh start, Madeline." After everything with the divorce and the bankruptcy. I looked at them both. My mother still standing, hands gripping the back of her chair. My father, sitting hunched and defeated. They chose her comfort over my safety. They'd probably known. Maybe not all the details, but they'd suspected something. They'd seen Mallory's new house and never questioned how she'd afforded it. They'd probably convinced themselves it was fine, that everything would work out, that I'd understand once I found out. What about my fresh start? I asked quietly. What about my dreams? My credit is destroyed. My name is on a mortgage for a house I've never seen. Did either of you think about me? Silence. That was answer enough. I stopped explaining, stopped crying, stopped reacting. My mother kept talking, her voice rising and falling in familiar patterns. Excuses for Mallory. Accusations aimed at me. Pleas for understanding. I let the words wash over me without absorbing them. Silence, I learned in that moment, makes guilty people talk. And Mallory talked. She explained how she'd needed a fresh start after the bankruptcy. How she couldn't keep living in that tiny apartment with her kids. How she'd seen my good credit as an opportunity we could share. We're twins, she said, like that justified everything. We're supposed to share everything. That's what twins do. The older police officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, identity theft is a federal crime. Being related doesn't change that. Mallory's expression shifted. The vulnerability vanished. Her jaw tightened. That calculating look returned, sharper than before. She was realizing this wasn't going away. That tears and explanations wouldn't fix this. That for once, consequences were coming. The fraud investigator's voice was neutral, almost bored, like he dealt with this kind of thing every day. Maybe he did. This qualifies as identity theft, he said, reviewing the documents spread across the table. And mortgage fraud. Both are federal offenses. He looked up at Mallory. You'll need to come down to the station for formal questioning. Mallory's knees started bouncing. That nervous tic she'd had since childhood. When she was little, that bouncing knee meant she was about to get in trouble. It meant she'd been caught. Mine didn't. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, breathing steady despite the chaos swirling around me. I'd done nothing wrong. I had nothing to fear from questions or investigations. The truth was simple. Mallory had stolen my identity, forged my signature, and committed fraud. The evidence was in front of us. Her practiced handwriting. The redirected mail. The house she was currently living in, paid for with my stolen name. Was any family property used as collateral? The investigator asked, flipping through more papers. My mother's face went white. Actually white, like someone had drained the blood from her skin in an instant. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. What property? Yes. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too controlled. The investigator looked at my mother. Mrs. Porter. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. We co-signed, she whispered. Your father and I co-signed on the mortgage. We thought Mallory would make the payments. We thought it would help her get back on her feet. They'd co-signed, using their house as collateral. The house I'd moved back into to help care for Dad after his stroke. The house I'd grown up in. The house that held every childhood memory I had. If this mortgage defaulted, my parents would lose everything. And they'd done it to help Mallory commit fraud against me. We thought it was temporary, my mother whispered. Her hands were shaking now. Just until Mallory got back on her feet. Just until she could refinance in her own name. She promised it would only be a few months. Temporary fraud. Temporary destruction. As if putting a time limit on betrayal made it acceptable. As if planning to fix it later erased the crime happening now. Did you think about asking me? Said. My voice was still calm, but ice ran underneath the words. Did you consider that using my identity without permission was illegal? That you were helping her commit a federal crime? My father finally looked at me. Really looked at me. I saw the moment he understood what they'd done. Not just to me but to themselves. By co-signing a fraudulent mortgage, they'd made themselves accomplices. The house they'd spent 30 years paying off was now at risk. And they'd done it willingly, knowingly, to help one daughter destroy the other. I packed quietly that evening. No goodbye speech. No slammed doors. No dramatic confrontation. Just boxes and clarity. My clothes folded neatly. My books stacked carefully. My important documents, the real ones, the ones Mallory hadn't stolen, secured in a locked file box. My parents watched from the living room doorway but didn't try to stop me. They knew better. They'd chosen their side when they co-signed that mortgage. When they'd helped Mallory steal my identity. When they'd put their house at risk to enable fraud. They thought I was retreating, running away, giving up. They were wrong. I was repositioning, getting distance, protecting myself from people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted. By the time I loaded the last box into my car, the sun was setting. I took one last look at the house I'd grown up in. The house I'd moved back to out of love and duty. The house I'd never step foot in again. The mortgage was frozen within 48 hours. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in identity theft cases, moved fast. She filed emergency motions, contacted the mortgage company, and placed fraud alerts on every credit bureau. Payments stopped. The house Mallory had stolen my identity to buy was now in legal limbo. No one could sell it. No one could refinance it. No one could do anything until the fraud investigation concluded. Mallory called me 37 times in one night. I knew because I checked my phone the next morning. 37 missed calls. 15 voicemails. 23 text messages. Each one more desperate than the last. Please pick up. We need to talk. You're ruining everything. The kids need a place to live. How can you do this to family? I didn't answer once. I blocked her number and went back to sleep. The IRS letter arrived next. Then another agency. Then another. Each envelope heavier than the last. Mallory had opened credit cards in my name. Taken out personal loans. Signed up for store financing at furniture stores and electronics retailers. The house was just the biggest fraud. It wasn't the only one. My stolen identity had been busy. In 6 months, Mallory had accumulated $47,000 in debt using my name. $47,000 I knew nothing about until creditors started calling. Until collection agencies started sending letters. Until the IRS wanted to know about unreported income from a side business I'd never operated. Attorney Chen documented everything. Every forged signature. Every fraudulent account. Every stolen piece of my identity. The evidence file grew thicker each day. Mallory's crimes weren't just serious. They were extensive, calculated, and thoroughly documented. She'd left a paper trail a mile long. She'd been sloppy in her greed. Mallory showed up at my apartment unannounced 2 weeks later. She'd somehow found out where I was living. Maybe she'd followed me from work. Maybe she'd hired someone to track me down. It didn't matter. You're ruining my life, she sobbed at my door. Tears streamed down her face. Her makeup was smudged. She looked genuinely destroyed. Once upon a time, seeing my twin in pain would have broken my heart. Would have made me want to fix everything. Would have made me fold. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No guilt. Just an empty space where my love for her used to live. No, I said calmly. You ruined your own life when you committed federal crimes. You ruined my life when you stole my identity. I'm just making sure you face consequences for once. She reached for me. I stepped back and closed the door. Through the wood I heard her crying. I didn't open it again. Charges were filed 3 weeks after the initial discovery. The federal prosecutor took the case because mortgage fraud crossed state lines and involved multiple financial institutions. Attorney Chen called with updates. They're charging her with identity theft, mortgage fraud, credit card fraud, and wire fraud. Given the amount of money involved and the premeditated nature of the crimes, she's looking at serious prison time. The word warrant echoed in my head like a bell. Mallory would be arrested. Again. This time not just questioned but formally charged and processed. My parents stopped calling after I refused to drop the charges. My mother had begged. My father had tried reasoning. Both had eventually resorted to anger. "You're tearing this family apart," my mother had screamed during our last conversation. "Over money. Over a house. Is that really more important than your sister?" "She made it about money when she stole from me," I'd replied. Then I'd hung up. They hadn't called again. Mallory wouldn't look at me again when we stood in the courtroom. She kept her eyes down, focused on her hands folded in front of her orange jumpsuit. The jumpsuit looked wrong on her. Too bright. Too institutional. Too real. The judge did look at me though. When the prosecutor presented the evidence, the forged signatures, the redirected mail, the documented timeline of fraud, the judge's expression hardened. When Mallory's public defender tried to argue that this was a family dispute that had gotten out of hand, the judge cut him off. "This is identity theft and fraud," she said firmly. "The fact that the perpetrator and victim are related makes this worse, not better. It represents a profound violation of trust." That was enough. That one sentence from someone in authority validating what I'd known all along. I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't been cruel. I'd been right to protect myself. I'd been right to press charges. I'd been right to refuse to let family loyalty become an excuse for federal crimes. The house was gone within 2 months. Foreclosure proceedings moved quickly once the fraud was confirmed. The mortgage company wanted nothing to do with the tangled legal mess Mallory had created. The house that Mallory called her miracle was sold at auction. She got nothing. My parents got nothing. The money went to pay back the bank for the fraudulent loan. Her credit was destroyed. Actually destroyed, not just damaged. Bankruptcy from before, now compounded by fraud convictions and unpaid debts. She'd never qualify for another mortgage. Never get approved for a credit card. Never pass a background check for a decent job. The golden child finally faced daylight. 32 years of being protected, being excused, being enabled had finally caught up with her. And she'd done it to herself. Every choice. Every forged signature. Every stolen piece of my identity. All her decisions. All her consequences. I felt no satisfaction. No triumph. Just a quiet acknowledgement that justice had happened. My parents lost the family home trying to save her. The co-signed mortgage they'd put their house up for as collateral came due. They couldn't make the payments on Dad's disability income alone. The bank foreclosed on that house too. 30 years of mortgage payments. 30 years of memories. Gone because they'd chosen to enable Mallory's fraud instead of stopping it. They never asked how I was. Not when I was dealing with creditors and debt collectors. Not when I was trying to rebuild my destroyed credit. Not when I was paying thousands in legal fees to clean up the mess Mallory had made of my financial life. That told me everything. Their concern began and ended with Mallory. I'd been the responsible one for so long that they'd forgotten I had needs too. Forgotten I deserved protection too. Forgotten I was their daughter too. I'd spent 28 years being the good daughter. The reliable one. The one who helped without being asked. And when I needed them to choose me just once, they couldn't do it. I rebuilt. New place. Clean credit. Quiet mornings. A 1-bedroom apartment in a building with good security. A job I was good at. Friends who actually cared about me. No chaos. No fear. No wondering when the next crisis would hit. No sacrificing my stability for someone else's poor choices. It took 2 years to clear all the fraudulent accounts from my credit report. 2 years of paperwork and phone calls and documentation. 2 years of proving over and over that I hadn't opened those accounts, hadn't signed those documents, hadn't made those purchases. But slowly, account by account, the fraud markers were removed. My credit score climbed. My name was cleared. I bought a car in my own name. Got approved for my own credit card. Saved money in an account only I could access. Started planning for a future that belonged only to me. The therapist I'd started seeing called it reclaiming my identity. Called it survival. Mallory is blocked. My parents don't call. And for the first time in my life, I'm not carrying someone else's mess. Just my own, and it's surprisingly light. Mallory served 18 months in federal prison for the fraud convictions. She's out now, living with an aunt in another state. We have no contact. My parents eventually found an apartment they could afford after losing the house. We exchange Christmas cards. Nothing more. I don't feel guilty about it anymore. For a long time I wondered if I was cruel. If I should have shown more mercy. If family was supposed to forgive anything. But I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to make someone else comfortable. It doesn't mean pretending the harm never happened. I didn't destroy my family. The family destroyed itself through enabling, through excuses, through choosing one daughter's comfort over the other daughter's safety. I survived them. And now, finally, I'm living for myself.